The grandfather clock in the Andrews living room chimes midnight, its heavy toll swallowed by the Montana darkness. Stanley Andrews, 68, grips the quilt his mother stitched decades ago, sweat beading on his weathered brow. His right calf throbs, not the ache of old war wounds, but crawling, alien sensation, like something alive slithering beneath the skin. Eleanor, 65, stirs beside him, her voice thin with dread. Stands back. He mutters, "It's nothing, Ellie," but his words crack as he stares at his leg. Eleanor fumbles for the bedside lamp. Yellow light spills across the room, and they both freeze. Beneath Stanley's taut skin, something moves, a deliberate, serpentine ripple, not a muscle twitch, but an entity with purpose. Sweet Jesus, Stanley breathes, his Navy SEAL stoicism crumbling. Eleanor's hands tremble as she reaches for her phone, her nurse's instincts kicking in. The air feels thick, the silence between chimes suffocating. Stanley's eyes lock on his leg, where the things shift again, as if aware it's been seen. Viewer, what you do when the enemy isn't outside, but inside you? Eleanor dials 911, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. Stanley ignores the burning in his calf, the memory of a Sudan mission flickering in his mind. Muddy water, a teammate's warning. The operator's voice cuts through. "What's your emergency?" Eleanor's answer is a whisper. "There's something alive in my husband's leg." And that was only the beginning of the nightmare. The ER in Great Falls, Montana, hummed with the chaos of a late-night shift. Stanley Andrews lay on a gurney, his leg exposed under harsh fluorescent lights. Eleanor stood by his side, her three-ring binder of medical notes clutched like a shield. The young ER doctor, Dr. Ryan Patel, barely 30, scanned Stanley's chart with a furrowed brow. "Mr. Andrews, you're saying you feel movement in your leg?" Stanley's jaw tightened. "Not feel. See." He pointed to his calf, where, as if on cue, the skin rippled, a slow, deliberate undulation. Patel's eyes widened, his professional mask slipping. "Viewer, how do you explain something that defies every medical textbook?" Patel ordered an ultrasound, the technician's wand gliding over Stanley's leg. On the grainy screen, a tubular shadow shifted, independent of muscle or bone. "That's not normal anatomy," the tech muttered, glancing at Patel. Stanley's voice was low, controlled. "I told you something's in there." Eleanor leaned closer, her nurse's training keeping her calm. "What is it?" Patel hesitated. "I'm not sure. It could be parasitic." He referred Stanley to a tropical disease specialist, but the earliest appointment was 3 weeks away. Viewer, how do you wait 3 weeks when something's moving inside you? Back at their log home, Stanley and Eleanor faced sleepless nights. The movement intensified, now reaching above Stanley's knee. Eleanor researched parasitic infections, her laptop glowing in the dark. "Dracunculus guinea worm," she read aloud. "Endemic to part of Africa, like Sudan." Stanley froze, memories of 1993 flooding back. A classified SEAL mission near the Sudan-Ethiopian border. For men, including his friend Miguel Rodriguez, drank from a muddy pool after their water supply was lost in an ambush. Rodriguez had died in 2007, whispering about something moving inside him. Viewer, what if a single drink 30 years ago carried a death sentence? Stanley called his old teammate, Carl Jameson, now living in Idaho. "You ever feel anything off since Sudan?" he asked. Jameson laughed it off. "Just old age, Stan." "Why?" Stanley didn't push, but doubt gnawed at him. Had they all been exposed? Eleanor found Dr. William Hayes, a former military surgeon in Great Falls, through a nursing colleague. He worked with special forces in Africa. She said, hope in her voice. "If anyone knows, it's him." They booked an appointment for Tuesday. Viewer, what do you cling to when every doctor before has dismissed you? At Hayes's clinic, the walls bore maps of Sudan and Yemen, not generic art. Hayes, 60, with scarred forearms and no white coat, studied Stanley's file. Navy SEAL, 1976 to 2007, he said, meeting Stanley's eyes. "Our paths might have crossed in Kandahar." Stanley described the symptoms, mentioning Sudan. Hayes's pen paused. "Rodriguez's case, 2007, Walter Reed. Similar symptoms. I reviewed it. Stanley's heart raced. You knew about Miguel? Hayes nodded. Suspected parasites, but he was gone before we could test. Viewer, how does it feel to learn your friend's death could have been prevented? Hayes examined Stanley's leg with a handheld ultrasound. There, he said, showing a writhing, pale form on the screen. Likely dracunculus, but larger than typical. Eleanor's voice was steady. How large? Hayes frowned. Significant. We need to remove it. Stanley agreed to surgery the next day, a mix of relief and dread washing over him. That night, in their Great Fall Hotel, Stanley dreamed of Rodriguez on a beach, grinning. Took you long enough, brother. Viewer, what does it mean when a dead friend warns you in a dream? The surgical suite was stark, efficient. Hayes, assisted by Nurse Patricia Kelly, explained the procedure. Local anesthesia, small incision. You'll be awake. Stanley nodded, his SEAL training keeping him calm. Eleanor sat by his head, holding his hand. As Hayes made the incision, Stanley felt pressure, not pain. I see it, Hayes said, his forceps grasping something pale. He pulled gently, and Stanley felt a sliding sensation, like a rope being drawn from his flesh. Viewer, what's it like to feel something alive leaving your body? The parasite emerged, glistening impossibly long. Patricia adjusted the basin, her eyes widening. 15 centimeters, Hayes narrated. Then 30. Eleanor's grip tightened. At 60 centimeters, Hayes's voice held a tremor. This is exceptional. By 90, Patricia gasped softly. At 120, Hayes muttered, unprecedented. The worm kept coming. 150, 165, 183 centimeters. 6 feet. Hayes stepped back, his composure shattered. My God, he whispered. This is a medical nightmare. Viewer, what do you do when a monster inside you breaks every rule of science? Stanley stared at the parasite, a pale, glistening rope coiled in the basin. Eleanor covered her mouth, her nurse's poise cracking. Patricia dropped the basin, the clatter echoing. Hayes recovered first. Patricia, secure the specimen. Full documentation. Stanley's voice was hoarse. What the hell is that thing? Hayes, closing the incision, said dracunculus, but unlike any recorded case. It's a miracle it didn't kill you. Eleanor asked, could there be more? Hayes nodded. Possible. We'll scan tomorrow. Viewer, how do you sleep knowing there might be more monsters inside you? In recovery, Stanley fell hollow, the crawling gone but replaced by questions. Hayes preserved the specimen for study, its size drawing CDC attention. Dr. Elaine Becker called that evening. 30-year dormancy is unheard of, she said. Your case could change how we screen veterans. Stanley's mind drifted to Rodriguez. Had he carried multiple worms? The autopsy report, Becker confirmed, showed 3, smaller but still large. Viewer, what if your friend's death was a warning you missed? The MRI next morning was grueling, the machine's thumps echoing Stanley's pulse. Hayes reviewed the images in his office, relief in his voice. No mature parasites. Some calcified larvae likely dead. Eleanor exhaled, but Stanley's relief was tempered. Long-term damage? Hayes shrugged. We'll monitor. Your case is unique. Back at the hotel, Stanley called Laura Rodriguez, Miguel's widow. They reopened his case, he told her. Laura's voice trembled. He wasn't crazy? Stanley's throat tightened. No, Laura, he was right. Viewer, how do you apologize for not believing a dying friend? Laura flew to Great Falls, meeting Stanley and Eleanor at a diner. They said his pain meds caused illusions, she said, coffee untouched. I knew he wasn't lying. Stanley recounted his surgery. The 6-foot worm. Laura's eyes hardened. Go public. Make them listen. Stanley hesitated. SEALs avoided spotlights, but her words stuck. That afternoon, Hayes called him back to the clinic. His face was grim. The parasite's genetic markers, they're anomalous, not natural. Stanley's stomach dropped. Engineered? Hayes nodded slowly. Possibly. Sudan, 1993. Something was in that water. Viewer, what if the water you drank was a weapon? Hayes had 24 hours to file a mandatory report, triggering federal scrutiny. Stanley called Dr. Garner at Walter Reed, demanding the 4 living veterans with similar symptoms be warned. They deserve to know before intelligence agencies show up, he said. Garner agreed to expedite notifications. Stanley then contacted Senator Morrison's office, a powerful ally on the Armed Services Committee. This could affect dozens, Stanley warned. Morrison's chief of staff promised a briefing with defense and VA officials. Viewer, how do you prepare for a truth that could unravel decades of secrets? That night, a Washington Post reporter, Melissa Carter, called. We've heard about a bioweapon-linked parasite, she said. Stanley hung up, stunned. The story was leaking. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Someone wants this out or controlled. 2 DoD agents, Warren and Thomas, arrive at their hotel, probing the Sudan mission. Any unusual facilities near that waterhole? Warren asked. Stanley shook his head, but doubt crept in. Had they missed something? The agents warned against media contact, but Stanley sensed their agenda. Viewer, who do you trust when the truth becomes a battlefield? Stanley and Eleanor began documenting their ordeal. Dates, dismissals, costs. $7 drained from savings. Months of doctors calling Stanley paranoid. Laura's advice echoed, go public. Stanley called her back. I'm in. We tell our story, yours, mine, Miguel's. They planned a statement, focusing on human costs, not classified details. The next day, Carter's article hit. Veterans infected by rare parasite, possible bioweapon link. The internet erupted, and Morrison called for hearings. Viewer, what happens when a personal nightmare becomes a national scandal? Stanley stood in their hotel room, the TV blaring Carter's report. Clips showed the Great Falls Clinic, a grainy photo of a guinea worm. Eleanor muted the sound. This is out of our hands now. Stanley disagreed. Not if we shape it. He called Senator Morrison, who'd scheduled a secure Pentagon meeting. Your case demands answers, Morrison said. Stanley insisted, not just for me, for the others. The senator agreed, but warned some details will stay buried. Viewer, how do you fight for truth when parts are locked away? The DoD investigation deepened, identifying 12 more veterans with potential Sudan exposure. Stanley met James Mercer, a ranger with leg pain dismissed as arthritis. Mercer's scan showed a dormant larva, removed in a week. I thought I was losing it, he told Stanley. Martin Whitaker, another veteran, had a worm extracted from his thigh. Doctors called it PTSD, he said, shaking Stanley's hand. You changed that. Stanley felt purpose, but no closure. Viewer, how many others are still waiting to be believed? Dr. Hayes became a medical celebrity. His extraction videos studied worldwide. He called Stanley with updates. The CDC's ruling out bioweapons, he said. Natural mutation, rare variant. Stanley wasn't convinced. The waterhole's isolation, for seals infected, it felt too precise. He dug into old mission logs, finding a note. Their local guide had warned against cursed water. Had they ignored a critical clue? Viewer, what if a single warning could have saved lives? Laura Rodriguez pushed for Miguel's exhumation, approved for research. I want his truth told, she told Stanley. They drafted a public statement, shared at a press conference with Morrison. Stanley spoke. For 30 years, I carried a parasite from a mission. My friend died from the same. Doctors dismissed us. That stops now. The crowd, veterans, families, cheered. Social media exploded. Hashtag Believe Veterans trended. Viewer, what does it feel like to turn pain into a movement? The VA launched screening protocols, testing veterans from high-risk regions. 7 more cases emerged, all linked to Sudan, 1990 to 1995. Stanley testified before Congress, Eleanor by his side. Rodriguez deserved better, he said. So do the living. Morrison's bill passed, funding the Veterans Parasitic Disease Awareness Program. Stanley and Laura co-chaired it, training doctors to listen, not dismiss. Viewer, How do you rebuild trust in a system that failed you? A year later, Stanley stood at Walter Reed, launching the program. Behind him, a photo of Rodriguez in uniform. "This is for Miguel," he said, voice thick. Eleanor and Laura applauded, joined by veterans like Mercer. Young doctors took notes, learning to trust patients' reports. The program screened 5,100 veterans, finding 20 cases. Insurance reforms covered costs, easing burdens like Stanley's $21,000. Viewer, can one man's nightmare change a nation's care? Yet questions lingered. Stanley met with Morrison privately. "The Pentagon's closed the bioweapon angle," the senator said. Stanley pressed, "What about that water hole? Why us?" Morrison sighed. "Some files stay sealed. Focus on wins." Stanley left uneasy. A retired CIA contact hinted at a Sudan research site, long destroyed. No proof, just whispers. Viewer, how do you live knowing the full truth might never come? Stanley returned to Montana. His leg healed, but his mind restless. He and Eleanor hosted a community dinner for veterans, sharing stories. Laura visited, now an advocate. "Miguel's proud," she told Stanley. He smiled, but Sudan's shadow remained. At night, he'd wake, feeling phantom crawls, wondering who else carried silent monsters. Viewer, what secrets still hide in the bodies of those who served? In a Montana bedroom, Stanley Andrews faced a living nightmare. A 6-foot parasite, born from a single drink in Sudan 30 years ago. For months, doctors dismissed his pain. His savings bled dry until Dr. William Hayes pulled the monster free, shattering medical records in silence. Miguel Rodriguez, Stanley's friend, wasn't so lucky, dying in 2007, his pleas ignored. Stanley's fight exposed a rare parasite variant, affecting dozens of veterans, dismissed as delusions. Viewer, how many truths lie buried under disbelief? With Eleanor's unyielding support and Laura Rodriguez's resolve, Stanley turned personal horror into systemic change. The Veterans Parasitic Disease Awareness Program now screens thousands, trains doctors to listen, and funds care, honoring Rodriguez's memory. Senator Morrison's reforms ended insurance denials, saving families from debt. Yet, whispers of Sudan's cursed water and a possible bio-research site linger, sealed in classified files. Stanley, now 69, leads advocacy, haunted by unanswered questions but driven by purpose. Viewer, what do you do when the truth is half revealed? In their Montana home, Stanley and Eleanor sit on their porch, the Bitterroot Mountains aglow. The scar on his leg fades, but the mission continues, ensuring no veteran's pain is silenced. The parasite is gone, but its legacy lives in lives saved and truths believed. Viewer, what monsters might still lurk, waiting for someone to listen